Do you remember the first time you went to a wild place? I do. I was 8 years old. It was a swamp miles from anyone. The only sounds were birds, insects, and the thwap of my rubber boots as I pulled them from the muck.
Conserving nature and choosing the path of sustainable development is a compulsion, not a choice anymore.
We really must protect and promote the pulse of the planet.
Oxygen is much more valuable at this time than gold.
Why do mountains matter? They're a source of fresh water for half the world's population and also contain half of the planet's biodiversity hotspots. Our Hindu Kush Himalaya sustain nearly 2 billion people with water and food. What COP26, the UN Climate Summit, decides today is going to affect us all tomorrow.
But all is not yet lost. There are solutions. Sustainable Summits is here to share some of these. We are an informal network of mountain stakeholders with a mission to relieve pressure on mountain environments and to influence their preservation for future generations.
We send this powerful message from the Hindu Kush Himalaya, the pulse of the planet and the world's highest and most beleaguered mountain range, to reach critical decision makers gathered in Glasgow.
Our Sustainable Summit's global mountain community will highlight some proven solutions to combat the climate crisis that threatens to engulf us all.
Since 2010, our band of mountaineers, scientists, policymakers, conservationists, and indigenous leaders have shared their expertise with practical outcomes in flashpoints around the world. Colorado in the USA, Mount Cook in New Zealand, Mont Blanc in Chamonix, France. And now we speak to you from Nepal, in the shadow of Mount Everest, Sagarmatha.
Please listen. In your hands and in our immediate action to avert this catastrophe rests the future of the planet and indeed all humanity. Act now. There is still time to pull back from the brink.
Our planet Earth, home to humankind, animals, plants, and intricate ecosystems formed over millennia, is undergoing irreparable destruction. The climate crisis is threatening to end the world as we know it. This catastrophe is human-made. Ecosystems, wildlife, weather patterns, everything that links humanity to nature and that we depend on is threatened. The Arctic sea ice and the Antarctic ice sheet, two of the largest reserves of ice in the world, are melting, and it is rightly identified as one of the most significant symptoms of the climate crisis. However, the world's third largest reserve of frozen water, the highest and the largest mountain range in the world, a mountain range upon which 1.9 billion people depend for food and water, the Hindu Kush Himalaya, is melting at an alarmingly fast rate. Yet its cries for help have gone unheard.
If the world manages to stabilize at 1.5 degree Celsius warming by the end of the century, the Hindu Kush Himalayan glaciers are projected to shrink by 1/3. So 1/3 of the glaciers are likely to melt away. But then if we go by current emission scenario, then 2/3 of our glaciers are likely to vanish. So these are quite serious kind of impacts. So what happens here actually is quite important, impacting at least 1/4 of the global population.
Grand mountains are the sources, wonderment and inspiration to many. They are one of the world's most vulnerable ecosystem.
Even if temperatures were to rise by 1.5 degrees, that's too hot for our region. Communities in our region are already facing the brunt of increasingly frequent floods, droughts, and these sorts of impacts are completely destabilizing the well-being of the people that rely on this region.
If you look at springs, they are a part of our agro-ecosystem since ages, and now we all know that springs are drying up. And it is very disturbing because, springs not only fulfill the drinking water needs of our entire community, Himalayan community where we live, it is actually a part of our entire system,
Because we are at the top of the world, we experience everything fast, including climate change impacts. Our glaciers are melting very fast. The snow cover is decreasing, snow line is retreating. Floods are increasing both in frequency and intensity. Disasters in many forms and shapes brought about by unpredictable weather is also increasing.
Here we have periodic drought, and this all effect on agriculture. And also from effect of climate change that include flood and drought, the women have to move their home and have to migration.
The world over, mountains are critical to mountain communities and to those living downstream. The most up-to-date science tells us that we can expect more extreme weather as a result of climate change. That means more drought, more floods, and more disasters.
Last year we had a record warming event in the Tasman Sea, and that leads to massive rainfall events, 1,000 millimetres plus. We've never seen these sorts of rainfall events, and the recession of the glaciers is also making it more difficult to put in huts, visitor facilities, as the ice recedes, and it's been receding at record rates since 2008.
But it isn't just people who are impacted by climate change. The habitats of animals are also impacted, and there is increased human-wildlife conflict. In global biodiversity hotspots such as the mountains of Central Asia, dramatic loss of critical grasslands and overrun of alien and invasive species threaten fragile mountain ecosystems.
In the Andes, for instance, reduced glacier runoff affects water availability for drinking and agriculture. In the Caucasus, sustainable mountain tourism models needs to be developed because of more unpredictable seasonal as well as higher risk of mountain ecosystem degradation. The Hindu Kush Himalayan region is affected by a higher risk of natural disasters.
The climate crisis is a truly global phenomenon, one that should be tackled with efforts at an international scale, and strategies should be formulated keeping in mind that a huge brunt of its devastations will be borne at the earliest stages by some of the most vulnerable communities around the world.
Global warming is changing the glaciers, changing the mountains. But global warming, climate change, is coming from industrialized cities, from traffic in the cities, from traffic everywhere.
This is not just an issue for mountain communities, that rely on these activities, but also for the recreationists and people who benefit and also engage in mountain tourism and recreation for cultural and spiritual opportunities for renewal.
It cannot be emphasized enough how pressing is the need for the world to come together on climate action. We must reduce emissions. We must keep the warming under 1.5 degrees.
The message that needs to go out very loud and clear is that these are not common threats. These are existential threats. They're not country specific. They cannot be addressed by any one country alone. So unless we work together and we find solutions that are cross-cutting and that synergize the actions taken in one country by other countries, we're not going to be able to build regional resilience in a sustainable manner.
We need everyone on the planet to make changes that contribute to a more sustainable future. The IPCC has recently affirmed in its assessment report that the effects of human lifestyle on nature and climate are now undeniable.
As I climbed Mount Everest, I despaired at the mountains of trash everywhere. No respect for place or people, human impact at a very high level.
I strongly feel we must aim high with our actions. We can ensure that our cherished mountains are preserved and protected for future generations.
We need action now, from households to governments, from policies to personal decisions. All our efforts can help save the planet.
The wilderness has been tremendously empowering for me. Over the years, I've rowed across the ocean, I've climbed Mount Everest, I've walked across the Antarctic to the South Pole, and each of those has changed me profoundly. I find the wilderness in all its different forms a very powerful, empowering place. But unfortunately, the human race takes more than it gives.